The armor had been sitting in the Galactic Museum for 12,000 years. It was kept inside a special energy field that stopped time around it. Every alien species in the galaxy knew about this armor. They called it many names. They called it the, they called it the Soul Eater. But the original name, written in a language older than any living civilization, simply meant the burden. Commander Lyra was the first human ever allowed to see it. She stood in front of the display case, looking at the strange thing inside. The armor did not look like metal or cloth. It changed colors constantly, like oil floating on water. Some people said they saw scales when they looked at it. Others said they saw threads of light. A few claimed to see faces moving under its surface, mouths open in silent screams. Lyra saw none of these things. When she looked at the armor, she saw hope. The museum curator was a named Archon. He had 4 eyes that blinked one after another. He looked at Lyra with the kind of expression that older alien species always had when dealing with humans. It was a look that said humans were young and foolish and did not belong among the stars. "You understand," said, "that this artifact has killed every species that tried to wear it. 17 different species over 6,000 years. All of them died within moments of touching it." Lyra nodded. She had read all the reports. She knew exactly what she was getting into. "The Council believes humans are too weak to survive," continued. "Your kind has only been traveling through space for 200 years. You do not have the strong minds of the. You do not have the backup organs of my people. You do not have the mental shields of the. What makes you think you can succeed where everyone else has failed?" Lyra turned to look at the alien. Her face was calm. "Because we were not supposed to survive our own planet," she said, "and yet here we are." Dr. Marsh walked up to them. He was the science expert from Earth, a thin man with nervous hands. He was holding a data tablet against his chest like a shield. "Commander," said in a quiet voice, "the readings are very strange. The armor appears to be partly alive. It has a heartbeat, about 3 beats per minute, and it seems to be watching us." "Watching?" Lyra asked. Swallowed hard. "The energy patterns change whenever someone moves. It tracks movement. It has been tracking you specifically since you entered this room." Made a sound that might have been laughter. "You see, it has already chosen its next victim. The always knows when fresh prey has arrived." But Lyra was no longer listening to him. She had stepped closer to the energy field. She could feel cold coming from the barrier. The armor seemed to move, shifting toward her like a living thing. "Turn off the field," she said. "Commander, the safety rules say we need to," began. "Turn it off." The energy field disappeared with a sound like breaking glass. The temperature in the room dropped quickly, and the armor began to unfold. It moved like something alive. Pieces separated and reached outward. Plates slid over each other with a sound like whispered words. The faces under the surface became clearer now, and Lyra realized they were not faces at all. They were memories. Thousands of memories, saved in whatever impossible material made up the armor. She saw a warrior with 6 arms, falling to the ground as the armor took his life. She saw a being made of pure light, going dark like a candle in a storm. She saw children and soldiers and scholars and kings. Each one had been sure they would be the one to control the burden. Each one had been wrong. The armor reached for her. Every part of Lyra screamed at her to run away, to go back, to ask for the energy field to come back on. She could feel the hunger of this thing. It was ancient and patient and bigger than anything she could imagine. It wanted her. It wanted what every living thing had inside them, the spark of life, the flame of awareness, the precious fuel that made living worth doing. But Lyra had not become the youngest commander in Earth's fleet by listening to fear. She had survived the Battle of Titan's Gate, where most of her crew had died. She had walked through the ruins of New Mumbai to save survivors after the attack. She had looked into the empty space between stars and refused to look away. She reached back toward the armor. Her fingers touched its surface, and everything went white. Pain was too small a word for what happened next. The armor did not just touch her skin. It flooded into her completely, rushing through her nervous system like hot metal through cracks in stone. She felt it looking at her, testing her, measuring every cell and every thought and every secret she had ever kept. In the museum room, her body fell to the floor, was screaming for doctors, was backing away, his 4 eyes wide with something that might have been fear or might have been satisfaction. Alarms were sounding all through the building. But Lyra was not in the museum anymore. She stood in total darkness, and she was not alone. "You are small," said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. "Smaller than most who came before. Your species is young. Your body is weak. Your mind is limited." Lyra could not see who was speaking, but she could feel something all around her, something huge and old and completely alien. "Why do you reach for what you cannot hold?" the voice asked. "Because someone has to," Lyra said. Her voice sounded strange in this place, thin and far away. "Because there are dangers coming that my people cannot face alone. Because the armor exists, and if it exists, it can be used." Others have said the same things. The warrior believed he could use me to save his dying world. The queen thought I would make her people impossible to defeat. The champion was certain his cause was good enough to deserve my power. The voice paused. "They all burned." "I know. And yet you reach anyway." "Yes." There was a long silence. In the darkness, Lyra became aware of movement around her, shapes circling just beyond what she could see. The memories, she realized. The saved minds of everyone who had tried to bond with the armor and failed. They were here, trapped between life and death, watching to see if she would join them. "What makes you different?" the voice asked. Lyra thought about the question carefully. She thought about growing up in New Boston, about her mother who worked until it killed her, about her father who dreamed of stars he would never reach. She thought about the war, about friends she had lost, about choices she had made that still kept her awake at night. "Nothing," she said finally. "Nothing makes me different. I am small and weak and limited, just like you said. My species is young. We have made terrible mistakes. We have hurt each other in ways that older civilizations cannot understand." The shapes moved closer. She could almost see faces now. "But we do not stop," Lyra continued. "That is the only thing we have ever been good at. No matter how many times we fall, no matter how badly we fail, we get back up. We try again. We change and survive and keep moving forward, even when every smart calculation says we should give up. Being stubborn is not a good quality. Maybe not, but it is what we are." The darkness shifted. The circling shapes paused. And for the first time, Lyra felt something other than hunger from the presence around her. She felt curiosity. The darkness around Lyra began to change. The shapes that had been circling her stopped moving. She could feel the ancient presence considering her words, turning them over like stones in a river. "The others tried to control me," the voice said. "They believed they could take my power and stay the same. They were wrong. The burden does not give power, it shares power, and sharing requires giving up control." "I understand what that means." "Do you?" "It means trusting something outside yourself. It means accepting that you are not the most important thing in the universe and never will be." Lyra thought about her crew aboard the ship Persistence, waiting in space above the museum world. She thought about Danny Hayes, her second in command, who had argued against this mission but supported her anyway. She thought about Dr. Price, the ship's counselor, who had warned her that wanting power to protect others was still wanting power. "I'm not here for myself," she said. "Everyone says that." "I know, but I mean it." Another silence stretched out, longer than before. The shapes around her began to drift away, fading back into the darkness they came from. "Very well," the voice said, "we will see." And then the pain came back, but it was different this time. Not an attack, but an invitation. Not a fight, but an embrace. The armor flowed over Lyra's body like liquid shadow. It sealed itself to her skin with perfect fit. She felt it connecting to her nervous system, not replacing her will but making it stronger. She felt its memories becoming open to her. Thousands of years of knowledge and experience waiting to be explored. And she felt its grief. The armor had not killed all those who tried to wear it. It had shared itself with them, and they had not been able to handle the weight of that sharing. They had tried to dominate instead of cooperate. They had tried to take instead of receive. The disconnect had destroyed them. The armor was not a weapon. It was a partnership. And for 12,000 years, it had been looking for someone willing to be a partner instead of a master. In the museum room, Lyra opened her eyes. The armor covered her completely now. Its surface still shifted, but somehow calmer, more settled. She rose to her feet, and the movement felt easy, as if gravity had become optional. Was staring at her with complete shock on his face. Was crying, tears running down his cheeks as he understood what he was seeing. Something impossible had just happened. A human had bonded with the... "This cannot be," the Archon whispered. "This is impossible." Lyra looked at her hands, watching the armor flow across her fingers like a second skin. She could feel the burden's presence in her mind. It was vast and ancient, but no longer threatening. It was waiting, patient and curious, to see what she would do with the gift it had given her. "Contact the persistence," she said. Her voice sounded deeper now, with echoes that had not been there before. "Tell Commander Hayes to prepare for my return, and tell him the galaxy just got a lot more interesting." 6 months passed after Lyra bonded with the armor. In that time, she learned things that no human had ever known. The armor's memories went back to the beginning of galactic history and beyond. They reached to a time when the universe was young, and the first smart species were just starting to reach for the stars. The armor had been created by a civilization called the Architects. They were so advanced that even the memory of their name had been lost to everyone except a few old texts. They had designed the burden not as a weapon, but as a test. A way of finding people from across the galaxy who had the right combination of qualities for something they called the Great Work. What the Great Work actually was remained unclear. The armor's memories became strange and broken when Lyra tried to explore that particular topic. But one thing was certain. The Architects had believed that something was coming, something that would threaten all life in the universe. They had created the burden to help prepare for it. Lyra was the first being in 12,000 years to successfully bond with the armor. That made her either the most important person in the galaxy or the most dangerous, depending on who was asked. Right now, she sat in a meeting room aboard Unity Station. This was a huge space platform that served as headquarters for the Galactic Council. Around her sat representatives of 17 different species. All of them stared at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to fear to barely hidden anger. "You must understand our concern," said the leader of the group. He was a massive being, nearly 3 meters tall, with skin like weathered stone and eyes that burned with inner fire. "That has been a symbol of our history for thousands of years. To see it bonded to a human, a species that my people once considered barely more than animals." "Choose your next words carefully," said Admiral Blake, Earth's senior military representative. She was a small woman with silver hair and a will made of steel. She had been fighting aggression for longer than Lyra had been alive. "The war ended 30 years ago. We have a peace agreement." "Agreements can be changed. So can our weapons." The room exploded into overlapping arguments. Voices rose and fell in a dozen different languages. Lyra watched the chaos happen. The armor hummed quietly against her skin. She could feel it studying the situation, analyzing threats and politics. It had seen meetings like this before, thousands of them across the centuries. "Enough," she said quietly. The word should have been lost in all the noise. Instead, it cut through the shouting like a knife, making the room silent in an instant. The armor had made her voice stronger, sending it directly into the hearing centers of every being present. "I did not come here to be argued about," Lyra continued. "I came here to share information that concerns all of you. The armor has shown me things, memories from the civilization that created it, and those memories contain a warning." "What kind of warning?" asked, who had been given permission to attend because of his role in the bonding incident. Lyra stood up, and as she did, the armor began to show images in the air around her. Pictures of star systems, of civilizations rising and falling, of something vast and dark moving between galaxies. "The architects called them the Silence," she said. "They are not a species in any way we would recognize. They are an absence, a nothing. They consume not matter or energy but meaning itself. They erase existence from the universe and leave nothing behind." The images showed worlds disappearing, not destroyed but simply gone as if they had never existed. Stars going dark, entire civilizations vanishing overnight, leaving no trace they had ever been real. "The architects created the burden to find and prepare people who might be able to stand against the Silence," Lyra continued. "They believed that the combination of qualities needed for successful bonding might also be the key to surviving contact with the enemy. And now you carry this burden," said Matriarch of her mental voice echoing in every mind present. "A human, carrying the hopes of a dead civilization. Forgive me for doubting, Commander, but your species has been in space for barely 200 years. What makes you qualified to save the galaxy?" Lyra thought about the question. 6 months ago, she might have answered with pride, with facts about human achievement. But the armor had changed her perspective. She had seen civilizations far greater than humanity rise and fall. She had witnessed beings of incredible power fail where she had succeeded. "Nothing qualifies me," she admitted. "I am not a hero or a chosen one. I am just a woman who reached for something when she was told not to and something reached back. But the armor chose me, and I have to believe that means something." "The Silence is coming," she continued. "The armor's memories suggest we have perhaps 50 years before they reach our galaxy. That is not enough time to become powerful enough to fight them, but it might be enough time to become united enough to survive." Admiral Blake spoke first after Lyra finished explaining about the Silence. Her voice was calm and steady, the voice of someone who had seen many battles. "The Coalition will commit to this effort," she said. "If Commander believes the threat is real, that is enough for us." Made a sound of disgust. "Of course the humans support their own, but why should they risk our resources for a threat that may not even exist?" "Because if it does exist and we do nothing, there will be no left to regret the decision." Lyra stepped forward and the armor shifted with her movement. Plates slid and changed shape in a display that was both beautiful and slightly threatening. "I am not asking for your trust. Trust must be earned, and we have not earned yours yet. I am asking for your attention. Give me 1 year. Let me prove that the threat is real and that working together is the only way to face it. If I fail, you lose nothing but time. If I succeed, we all gain a chance at survival." The silence stretched on. Lyra held her breath, waiting. Finally, almost too small to notice, nodded. 1 year, human, prove your worth." One by one, the other species agreed. Not with enthusiasm, not with trust, but with the understanding that ignoring a potential galaxy-ending threat was not an option any of them could afford. When the meeting ended, Lyra returned to the Persistence. Danny Hayes was waiting for her in the shuttle bay, his arms crossed and his expression troubled. He had been her second in command for 5 years. He knew her better than anyone. "How did it go?" he asked. "They gave us a year," Lyra said. 1 year to prove the threat is real and to start building an alliance." "And can we do that?" Lyra paused. The armor hummed against her skin, feeding her information from its ancient memories. "The architects left more than just the armor," she said. "There are other artifacts scattered across the galaxy. Tools and weapons and technologies they designed for the great work. The armor knows where they are. Danny's eyebrows rose. More artifacts like the armor. Different, each one serves a different purpose, but all of them work the same way. They require a bond, a partnership. The armor can guide us to them, but finding people who can bond with them. She trailed off, shaking her head. That will be the hard part. Where do we start? Lyra smiled, though it did not quite reach her eyes. There is a dead world about 3 weeks from here. The armor calls it Remnant. The first artifact is there. The journey to Remnant was quiet. The crew of the Persistence had grown used to their commander's changes over the past 6 months, but there was still tension in the air. Lyra spent most of her time in her quarters, communicating with the armor, learning its secrets. Dr. Price visited her on the 3rd day of the journey. She was the ship's counselor, a woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that saw too much. "The crew is worried about you," said, sitting down across from Lyra. "I know. Danny says you do not sleep anymore. You barely eat. You spend hours just staring at nothing, talking to something no one else can see." Lyra looked at her hands. The armor was always there now, a thin layer of shifting shadow just beneath her skin. "The armor sustains me. I do not need sleep or food the way I used to." "That is exactly what worries people." Leaned forward. "You are becoming something other than human, Lyra. Every day you seem a little more distant, a little less connected to the people around you." "I am still me." "Are you?" Because the woman I knew 6 months ago would never have spoken to the Galactic Council the way you did. She would never have threatened even indirectly. She would never have been so certain of herself. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. The armor stirred, offering suggestions, perspectives, solutions. She pushed them away. "You are right," she said finally. "I am changing. But change is not the same as loss. I am still Lyra. I still care about this crew, about Earth, about all the things I cared about before. The armor adds to what I am. It does not replace it." Studied her face. "I hope you are right. Because if you lose yourself in that thing, I am not sure anyone will be able to bring you back." The Persistence arrived at Remnant on schedule. The planet hung in the darkness of an unnamed star system. Its surface was covered with scars from ancient weapons. Its air had boiled away long ago from some disaster lost to history. Lyra led the ground team personally. Marsh insisted on coming, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. Sergeant Park, head of the ship's security, came as well. He was a broad man with a soldier's careful movements, and he had been suspicious of the armor since the beginning. Their shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by tall pillars of unknown material. As they stepped out onto the dead surface of Remnant, Lyra felt the armor come alive with recognition. This place was important. "This way," she said, following an instinct that was not entirely her own. The architect facility was buried beneath the surface. A shaft opened at Lyra's approach, ancient systems waking from thousands of years of sleep. They descended in silence, passing through rooms filled with machines beyond their understanding. Kept talking, recording everything he saw. But even his excitement began to fade as the scale of what they were seeing became clear. The architects had not just been advanced. They had been operating on a level that made modern technology look like children's toys. At last, they reached the central chamber. The artifact sat in the middle of the room, floating in a field of energy that made the air shimmer. It was smaller than Lyra had expected, about the size of her fist. But she could feel its power from across the room. It pulsed with light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal space. "The heart of navigation," Lyra said, the words coming from the armor's memory. "It allows instant travel across any distance. The architects used it to coordinate their response to the silence across multiple galaxies." "Instant travel," breathed. "Do you understand what that means? We could reach any point in the universe in seconds." "And that is why we have to be careful," said. His hand rested on his weapon. Something this powerful does not come without a cost. He was right. The armor's memories were clear on that point. The heart of navigation was not just a machine. Like the armor itself, it was a partnership. And like the armor, it would test anyone who tried to use it. "Stay here," Lyra said. "I have to do this alone." She walked forward, each step bringing her closer to the artifact and its terrible, beautiful power. The armor began to vibrate with the heart, two pieces of the same ancient design recognizing each other across time. When she reached out and touched it, she was ready. The test was different from the one the armor had given her. Where the burden had demanded surrender, the heart demanded precision. It showed her the universe as the architects had seen it. Every point in space connected to every other point by invisible threads of possibility. Lyra was not a navigator. She was a soldier, a commander. But she had something that made up for her lack of natural talent. She had the armor, and through it, the accumulated wisdom of every being who had tried to bond with the burden. She drew on those memories, letting the knowledge of countless failed attempts guide her away from mistakes. Slowly, carefully, she began to understand. The heart was not asking her to master it. Like the armor, it was looking for a partner, someone who could work with it instead of just using it. When Lyra opened her eyes, the heart was floating before her. Its glow matched the pulse of the armor against her skin. They had accepted each other. "It is done," she said, and stared at her with expressions of awe and fear. She could not blame them. She was changing, becoming something new in galactic history. A human carrying artifacts of a dead civilization, preparing to face a threat that had destroyed powers beyond imagination. But for the first time since she had bonded with the armor, Lyra felt something like hope. "Let us go home," she said. "We have work to do." 3 years had passed since Lyra retrieved the heart of navigation from Remnant. In that time, everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate empires fighting over territory and resources. It was becoming something new. An alliance built not on trust but on necessity. The evidence Lyra had presented, combined with the power of the artifacts she continued to find, had convinced even the most stubborn species that the threat was real. That had been the hardest to convince. Their pride made it difficult for them to accept that a human might be the key to survival. But himself had changed over the years. He had watched Lyra risk her life again and again, retrieving artifacts from dead worlds and dangerous places. He had seen her share those artifacts with worthy individuals from every species, not keeping the power for humanity alone. On this particular day, Lyra stood in a training facility on the She was watching a young warrior named struggle with the Shield of Standing, an artifact that created barriers capable of stopping almost any attack. "You are trying too hard to control it," Lyra said. Her voice was calm, patient. "The shield does not want to be controlled, it wants to be asked." Growled in frustration. He was massive even by standards, with muscles that could crush stone and eyes that burned like hot coals. "I am asking. It does not listen. You are demanding. There is a difference." The young warrior turned to face her. "How do you do it? How do you make these things obey you?" "I do not make them obey, I work with them." Lyra walked closer, the armor shifting on her skin. "The architects designed these artifacts to find partners, not servants. When you demand obedience, you are telling the shield that you see it as a tool, but it is more than that. It has a kind of awareness, a will of its own. Until you respect that, it will never bond with you." Was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he closed his eyes and reached for the shield again. This time his approach was different, gentler, more like an invitation than a command. The shield flickered. For just a second it seemed to reach back toward him. "Better," Lyra said. "Keep practicing, you will get there." She left the training facility and walked out into the red sunlight of the Danny Hayes was waiting for her, leaning against a transport vehicle. "How is he doing?" Danny asked. "Slowly, but he is making progress." Lyra looked up at the alien sky. They have spent their entire history believing that strength comes from dominance. Teaching them to partner instead of conquer is not easy. You have done it before. The ambassador bonded with the eye of truth last month. The scientist connected with the hand of making 2 weeks ago. Danny smiled. You are building an army, Lyra. An army of artifact bearers from every major species in the galaxy. Not an army, a network. Lyra turned to face him. The architects understood something that we are only beginning to learn. True power does not come from control, it comes from connection. Every artifact bearer, every partnership we create makes the whole network stronger. Danny nodded slowly. The council meeting is tomorrow. Are you ready? As ready as I can be. The next day, Lyra stood before the Galactic Council for what felt like the 100th time. But this meeting was different. For the first time, representatives of every major species were present not as rivals but as allies. Admiral Blake was there, older now but still sharp. Sat beside her, his massive form taking up 3 normal seats. Matriarch floated in a sphere of water, her tentacles moving in slow patterns. The museum curator who had witnessed the first bonding had become one of Lyra's most trusted advisors. We have been preparing for 3 years, Lyra said. 17 artifact bearers have been identified and bonded across 12 species. The network is growing stronger every day, but the silence is coming faster than we expected. She gestured, and the armor projected images into the air. Long-range sensor readings showing something dark and vast moving through the space between galaxies. Our latest projections suggest we have 7 years, not 50. The silence has been moving toward us all along. They sensed the artifacts being activated and changed course. The room erupted into worried murmurs, slammed his fist on the table. 7 years. That is not enough time. We have barely begun to prepare. I know. That is why I am proposing something drastic. Lyra paused, letting the tension build. The artifact network is powerful, but it is incomplete. There are still pieces missing, artifacts that the architects scattered across the most dangerous places in the universe. We need to retrieve them all, and we need to do it fast. What are you suggesting? Matriarch asked. I am suggesting we use the heart of navigation to create a permanent gateway network, one that connects every major civilization in the galaxy. With instant travel between worlds, we can coordinate our search, share resources, respond to threats faster than ever before. Admiral Blake frowned. Creating such a network would require enormous resources. Every species would have to contribute. Yes, but it would also bind us together in a way we have never been bound before. The gateway network would not just be transportation. It would be a symbol, proof that we have truly become one civilization, working toward one goal. The council members looked at each other. This was bigger than anything they had discussed before. This was not just an alliance. This was unity. Spoke first. The will contribute. If the human who wears the believes this is necessary, that is enough for me. One by one, the other species agreed. Not without argument, not without conditions, but they agreed. When the meeting ended, Danny found Lyra standing by a window, looking out at the stars. You did it, he said. You actually united the galaxy. Not yet, this is just the beginning. Lyra's voice was tired. The armor could sustain her body, but it could not touch the exhaustion in her soul. The hard part is still coming. Are you afraid? Lyra considered the question. I used to think fear was the enemy, that being brave meant not being afraid, but the armor taught me something different. Fear is just information. It tells you that something matters, that there are stakes worth caring about. She turned to face Danny, and for a moment she looked like the woman he had known before all this began. Before the armor, before the artifacts, before the weight of the galaxy settled on her shoulders. Yes, I am afraid, she said. The silence destroyed civilizations far greater than ours. The architects, with all their power, could only run and hide and leave tools behind for others to find. What makes us think we can do better? You, Danny said simply. You make us think we can do better. The way you refused to give up at the museum. The way you reached for the armor when everyone said you would die. That stubborn human refusal to accept impossible odds. Lyra smiled sadly. And if stubbornness is not enough, then at least we went down fighting together instead of dying alone. Danny put his hand on her shoulder. That has to count for something. The next 7 years were the busiest in galactic history. The Gateway Network spread from world to world, connecting civilizations that had never spoken to each other before. Artifact bearers trained together, learning to combine their powers into something greater than any individual. And always in the background, the silence grew closer. Lyra traveled constantly, retrieving the last of the scattered artifacts, bonding new bearers, strengthening the network. The armor changed with her, incorporating elements from each new piece of architect technology. She was no longer entirely human, not in any way that mattered to biology. But Danny had been wrong all those years ago when he worried she would lose herself. If anything, she had found parts of herself she never knew existed. The armor had not replaced her humanity. It had revealed depths of it that no one had ever explored before. On the eve of the final battle, she stood on the observation deck of Unity Station one last time, looking out at the fleet that humanity and its allies had built together. Tomorrow, everything would change again. The silence arrived on a Tuesday. There was no warning, no dramatic announcement. One moment the outer colonies were going about their normal business. The next moment 3 of them simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not damaged, just gone as if they had never been there at all. Lyra felt them die through the artifact network. 17 bearers across 12 species, all connected through the tools the architects had left behind. She felt their shock, their fear, their determination. All ships to battle stations, she said, her voice carrying through the gateway network to every corner of the galaxy. The silence is here. The fleet that gathered was the largest in galactic history. Warships flew alongside human cruisers. Vessels moved in formation with transports. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years now stood together, united by the work of the past decade. Commanded the main battle line. The old warrior had changed over the years. His hatred of humans had transformed into something like respect, and his respect had grown into something that might almost be called friendship. "Human," he said over the communication channel, "I never thought I would say this, but I am honored to fight beside you." "The honor is mine," Lyra smiled. "Let us show the silence what happens when they threaten our galaxy." The battle began. The silence was everything the architect memories had warned about and worse. They moved through space like holes in reality, consuming everything they touched. Ships disappeared. Stars flickered and died. The very fabric of existence seemed to tear apart in their presence. But the Allied fleet had been preparing for 10 years. They knew they could not defeat the silence through force alone. The enemy was too vast, too fundamental. Instead, they fought a different kind of battle. The artifact bearers took their positions throughout the fleet. The young who had struggled so much with the shield of standing now created barriers that held back the silence's advance. The ambassador with the eye of truth saw through the enemy's attacks, predicting them before they happened. The scientist wielding the hand of making repaired ships faster than they could be damaged. And at the center of it all stood Lyra, connected to every bearer through the network she had spent a decade building. The armor had shown her the truth of the great work in her years of preparation. The architects had not created their tools to defeat the silence through force. They had created them to forge connections, to build partnerships, to prove that existence was not a solitary thing but a shared one. The silence consumed meaning, because meaning was the one thing they could not understand. They were the ultimate isolation, the final loneliness, and they could not survive contact with beings who had learned to be more than alone. Now, Lyra said. The artifact network activated fully for the first time. 17 bearers across 12 species, all joining their power through the tools the architects had created. Energy flowed through the network like blood through veins, connecting every ship, every soldier, every living being in the Allied fleet. Lyra felt them all, the fear and the hope, the determination and the doubt. She felt the warriors ready to die for their honor. She felt the philosophers seeking understanding even in the face of destruction. She felt the humans, her people, stubborn and scared and refusing to give up. She gathered all of that together, all of that meaning, all of that connection, and she reached out toward the silence. The enemy recoiled. For the first time in billions of years, the silence experienced something other than emptiness. Through Lyra, through the network, through the combined will of 100 species, they felt connection. They felt what it was like to be part of something larger than themselves. It was too much. The silence was built to consume, not to receive. They were designed to erase, not to understand. The flood of meaning and purpose and shared existence overwhelmed them in ways that weapons never could. They did not die. Beings like the silence could not die in any way that made sense, but they changed. They retreated not in defeat but in confusion. They needed time to process what they had felt, what they had learned. And as they, pulling back into the darkness between galaxies, the Allied fleet stood victorious. The celebration afterward was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Species that had been enemies embraced each other. Soldiers who had expected to die found themselves alive and surrounded by comrades from a dozen different worlds. Lyra stood apart from the celebration, watching from the observation deck of Unity Station. The armor was quiet against her skin, settled and content in a way it had never been before. For 12,000 years, it had been searching for someone who could complete the great work. Now, finally, that work was done. Danny found her there as he always did. His hair was completely gray now, and there were lines on his face that had not been there when this all began. But his eyes were still sharp, and his smile was still the same. "You did it," he said. "You actually saved the galaxy." "We did it," Lyra corrected. "None of this would have been possible without the Alliance, without the artifact bearers, without every species choosing to work together instead of fighting each other." Danny nodded. "So what happens now? The silence is gone. The great work is complete. What do you do with the rest of your life?" Lyra considered the question. The armor stirred, offering suggestions, possibilities. There were still threats in the universe, still problems to solve, challenges to face. But those were problems for another day. "Now we keep going," she said. "We build on what we have created. We make the Alliance stronger, deeper, more lasting. We prepare for whatever comes next." She turned to face him, and her smile carried the weight of years and the lightness of hope. "That is what humans do, Danny. We get back up. We try again. We keep moving forward." Danny stepped closer and stood beside her, looking out at the stars. "You know, when you first bonded with that armor, I was terrified. I thought I was going to lose you, that you would become something cold and distant and alien. And now I realize I was wrong. You did not become less human. You became more. You took everything that makes us who we are, all our stubbornness and hope and refusal to give up, and you showed the entire galaxy what that looks like." Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for staying with me through all of this, for reminding me who I was when I started to forget. That is what partners are for." They stood together in silence, watching the ships move through the darkness between stars. Ships from 100 species, united in a way that no one had thought possible. 12,000 years ago, an ancient civilization had created a test for the galaxy. They had asked one simple question. Could the beings of this universe learn to carry weight without breaking? Could they trust without losing themselves? Could they surrender without submitting? A human had answered, and everything had changed. The armor hummed softly against Lyra's skin, satisfied at last. The great work was complete, but as she looked out at the stars, she knew that this was not really an ending. It was a beginning. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between galaxies, the silence was learning what it meant to be connected. They might come back someday, changed and curious instead of hungry and destructive. Or they might retreat forever, unable to process what they had experienced. Either way, the galaxy was ready. Not because of weapons or power or technology, but because of something much simpler and much more profound. They had learned to face the darkness together. And together, they could face anything. The end.